Hi,
Oh,
everyone.
hello.
Just give me one
Hi.
second. I have somebody I just need to make a call to. Whoops, where am I?
No
I'm going to sign
problem.
out, guys. I've just lost everybody. Uh-huh.
I had a hard time getting to be able to get in, I guess because of all the
Oh,
bridges
okay.
and things.
Oh, let me in. Just let me just give one quick call. I'll be right back.
It wouldn't open my laptop. It just
Oh,
kept sitting there with a black screen spinning.
oh, oh, that's so special.
And I was just trying to bring up my iPad and all of a sudden the regular screen popped up. So it took a while. Are you
Ah,
completely exhausted today? Did you get any rest?
Um, I I personally was just too wired. I couldn't sleep.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't sleep well last night either.
oh, okay. I have a feeling it's kind of across the board, but we'll figure that out. But yeah, uh, I got enough rest, but I'm looking forward to maybe tonight sleeping a little bit better.
Yes, I hope so. I took a nap this afternoon. I went to
Oh,
BJ's and I walked for like an hour and a half. I walked around, which is hard for me. I haven't been
yeah,
walking that much.
right,
And
sure.
by the time I got home, I was like, oh my gosh. So I had a little lunch and then I came and sat down in here and I just thought, oh, I've got to take a nap. So I did.
Yep, yep. Hey, Linda.
I
It's nice to see you too. I don't like it when I take the afternoon nap because that, of course, makes my evening messed up. But sometimes you have no choice. You just sit down and that's it. You're
Yeah,
out.
but I say to the Alexa, I can't say it too loud. She'll start
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, we
I
both
say,
were.
you
And
know,
I think
set
I smelled it later in the afternoon, but Todd
set the
Moran.
alarm for 20 minutes. And if I can just do like 20 minutes, then I
Oh, oh,
refreshes
sure.
me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The problem I always find is that I didn't know I was that tired. I just pass out.
Yeah.
So I need to be proactive and just assume that I will.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you, Liz.
Well, it was a very successful event yesterday, I think.
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
think we had to do better than last year. I think we had so
We
many people.
The numbers so far are saying yes, we did better than last year,
I'm sure
which
we
is
did.
very comforting because it was a tremendous effort on many people's
Yeah.
part. So to think that it wasn't would be discouraging, but
I
yeah,
Yeah.
I
think we
think they
should
did
too.
very
Yeah,
well.
it's the second time. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate it. We'll talk about it, okay? Bye-bye. Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry. We
Hello.
the pilot light somehow got left, somehow blew out in the stove, and Liz was just calling to tell me, and
Oh,
Oh.
that's the
rather
second
important.
time it's happened. So
Oh.
we're not really sure why. So
Is there a draft in there that's
I don't know.
possibly the
The windows over the sink were open, so I don't know if it blew it out. I don't
last night was really
know.
windy.
Mhm.
And it was today. And I thought this afternoon I smelled it. And I'm like, no, maybe it's not. And then I just went on my merry way, but apparently it was blown out.
Oh.
Well, I'm
But we
glad
got it.
Liz was there to check it out.
Well, actually, Todd Moran found it, who's one of our group leaders. He found it. And
Oh,
then he texted me, but she just called me because she stopped at church and he told her.
Oh, good.
So
Oh.
okay,
he had
okay.
fixed it. He's always the one to find it. So anyway.
Oh.
Well, we're grateful for that skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hello everyone. I think that we are so we have Jenna, Nancy, Linda, and Barbara. I think that we are waiting. Hi Barbara, how are you?
All right, how are you?
I
Good, thank you. Thank
Can I
you.
just register one complaint?
We have a complaint.
Nobody sent spaghetti to me. That's all I'm
Oh,
gonna
Barbara,
say.
they didn't deliver it to you. It was a wildly wonderful night.
It
And
wow.
sounds it. It sounds it.
I said to
yeah.
Nancy as when you were on the phone with Liz that I
Mm,
knew we had to be making more money than we did last year
we
because
did.
we just had so many people and it
We
was
did.
really good turnout.
I was
Yeah.
a little jealous. Agnes told me about it. I was very jealous, so jealous that next year I am flying up specifically for this.
I was just going to
Oh,
say that to
good.
you, Barbara. I was just going to
That's
say
a
to
pretty
you.
expensive meal.
That's
You-
okay. The people that do it are well worth the expense.
Aw, you're so sweet, Barbara. Oh, that's so sweet. I was actually going to say to you, why don't you come next year? You get to see
I
the
am.
Pumpkin Festival, and yay! And we'll make sure the pilot lights are lit so
And there you go.
we don't.
Are
Agnes is
John and
supposed to be here.
Lydia going to be on
They're
tonight?
in Europe. No, they're in Europe.
Oh.
They're gone for 2 weeks.
Oh, where did they go?
On some cruise that starts in Sweden and goes
Nice.
to Amsterdam.
Yes.
And yeah, he
Yeah,
was
my
in this
friend
morning.
Kathy Harshar, who was there with me last night, she
Mhm.
left this afternoon. She's Catholic, and she was going with a tour group to Lourdes and
Oh, nice.
Medjugorje and Portugal and Spain.
Nice. Ooh,
So
that's nice.
they
Wow, that's nice.
a 1 week trip.
Mhm.
She was
Yeah.
excited about that.
That sounded a little better than Keensburg, Barbara.
A little bit.
Not Keensburg. What are we, Little Silver? I know. I met with somebody today. We've been talking about Keensburg all day. Okay. So, Little Silver, it sounds a little better.
Still better people in Little Silver. That's all I'm
Yeah.
gonna say.
Aw. Yeah, that's true. So we'll open with prayer, and when Agnes signs in, maybe she's having trouble signing in. She'll sign in. I don't know about Susan. Susan was anxious to get back. I assume she is busy right now. So Susan, when you get the copy of this, please, we miss you. Come back.
Well, they may be
Okay.
having the same trouble I had trying
Yeah,
to
I'm
get
thinking
signed
maybe
in.
Agnes is. Yeah. So, because I know she said she was going to be here, so hopefully she'll get signed in, and we'll just get started. This is a really complex chapter tonight. We'll do
Yes.
open prayer and we'll pray for help with this. The Lord be with you.
And
And also
also
with
with
I'm
you.
with you.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for bringing us together again on this cold and windy night. We pray that you be with us, O Lord, and to light our path so that we can understand what you need for us to see in this really complex chapter tonight. We pray, whatever it is, Lord, that you also guide us in taking this out into the world so that we can be bearers of your light and your grace to a world that searches still to find you. All this we ask in the name of your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Oh, Wolfgang, welcome. We have a new participant tonight.
Oh,
I
welcome.
like,
Hi, ladies.
hello.
Hi.
John is in Europe, so you are the only man with us. So everyone, so the church, Barbara, you are the only one that doesn't know Wolf. This is Wolfgang, one of our parishioners, and Wolf, this is Barbara. Barbara's in sunny Florida tonight. That's where she lives. But welcome to the class, Wolf.
Nice to meet
Thanks
you.
for
Will.
the invite to the Bible study. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So Wolf, we are starting on chapter 14 tonight of Genesis. We haven't been making fast progress.
Oh, I thought we were on 17. 14?
We were on 14.
No,
We
14.
are on Lot's captivity and rescue. And Wolf, when you have questions, just stop us because we know we're ahead of you. So just stop us when we need to stop because this is a really complex chapter. What did everybody think of this chapter?
I couldn't understand it, honestly.
Oh,
No.
it's complex, right?
Yes, it was unbearable with the names and not understanding who anybody was. And yeah, I mean,
Oh.
they have a lot of kings.
There are a
Right.
lot of kings, which actually has a theological meaning in this. It actually has, I don't know, theological. It actually has a meaning. Kings is mentioned, the word kings is actually mentioned 28 times in this passage. And
Hmm.
why that
Okay.
is significant, right, is that this passage is really to shine a light on Abram. And what the author wants us to see in mention of so many kings, several things. So first, hey Wolf. So first, Genesis is theology. The Bible is theology, not necessarily history. But the authors, right, the many authors of the Bible, especially the Hebrew Bible, do their best to use history, some pieces of history, to give realism and authenticity to the passages. So this probably actually happened, but it wasn't necessarily it wasn't necessary maybe for the author to say kings 28 times, but they want us to understand that that Abram is very powerful. And here are earthly kings that Abram's able to defeat. Why? Because he's got the ultimate king, God, on his side.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it is a contrast between earthly kingship and godly kingship. And because Abram is blessed by God and has the power of God's presence, then Abram is more powerful than these earthly kings. So there is a method behind its madness.
Okay.
So the history of this, right? And I am a bit slow tonight. So I have got my notes and I will be looking down. So the history of this, anybody else want to say anything about this passage? Other than yuck, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So it starts off, right, by all these names that I'm not even going to try to pronounce tonight. But what we know is there's 5 kings from cities in the Jordan Valley, right? Including Sodom and Gomorrah. You guys know that name, right? That's a famous name. And they rebel against their overlord, let's see if I can do it tonight, gang. Kedorlaomer, right? That's the only time I'm going to do that tonight. Kedorlaomer. Um, and so they revolt against him. They've been subjugated under him for 12 years, and they decide that they're going to start a rebellion against him, right?
Mhm.
Eastern kings, these 4 Eastern kings versus these 5 kings from the Jordan Valley. And what that probably means, what that rebellion probably means, is that they stop paying tribute. And they stop paying tribute to him, right? And so Kedorlaomer, I'm going to do it 3 times, decides to get 3 allied kings from Mesopotamia and go against these 5 rebellious cities, right? He's going to lead a counterattack against them. And I don't even know if it's quite a counterattack. It's more that they've probably stopped paying tribute and he's going to go and enforce, you know, his vassal states to pay the tribute that they're responsible for. And so this Eastern coalition of these 4 kings attack, the 5 kings in the Jordan Valley, including Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abram becomes involved, right? He gets these 318 men and he's going to go after them. Why? Because who's in Sodom and Gomorrah?
Lot,
Was
right?
it Lot?
Right?
Lot.
His nephew
Yes,
Lot,
Lot.
right?
Yeah.
So he's gonna go against them. He gets these 318 men. It's the only time that this word for men is used in the Hebrew Bible. It's a little bit different, and it infers slaves, right? It is, and I hate that word in the Hebrew Bible. It is not slavery in the way that we look at slavery. It is not. It is not an ethnic captivity, right? You could become a slave in Abram's time for many reasons, and mostly because you owed debt. So you would become enslaved and you'd sell yourself or you'd sell a family member to somebody to get out of debt, right? You're not, it's not ethnic. It is
Okay.
has no relation to slavery today. It's more of a servant, right? Like an indentured servant. And so Abram gets these 318 servants of his, right? And when scholars look at this today, they say, you know what? If he had 318 servants, his household was probably about 1,000 strong. Abram is not a poor nomad. He lives a semi-nomadic life, like a lot of people did in that day. But he is not poor, right? He's a man of means. He comes out of Egypt, a man of means. He's wealthy. He's powerful. He's able to muster 318 servants from his household. And in addition to that, he makes alliances, right? We hear about the Amorite who joins in this campaign also. He has alliances, and he goes into battle against this eastern coalition of these four kings, and he wins, right? He defeats them. He defeats them. That's simply what the first part of this passage is telling us. All of that stuff you couldn't pronounce, and all of that stuff was getting in your way. That's simply what it means. He comes out the victor, right? Now, I want to say just a few things about this. This is unique to Genesis, this story, because as you probably noticed, there is no other military campaign so far. In Genesis, we will see this, especially in the book of Joshua. Joshua will become infamous for its military campaigns, but this is the first time in Genesis, right? And we've got this array of kings that are named again to give historical value to this piece of writing, right? The first instance of a battle in Genesis. And it really stands alone because, as you've probably noticed when you looked at this, it doesn't seem to have any kind of connection to any of these other stories that we've talked about. Would you agree with that?
Mm, probably,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Mm.
somewhat different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an old piece of writing, right? I don't know how old it is compared to the other ones. Remember, there's an ancient Abram tradition and there's a newer, still ancient to us, but newer than some of the texts that this redactor came in and put together brilliantly to spin this theology. But this is certainly older. And the reason that we know that it's older is because if you noticed, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it and just looking down, but there's a lot of names of places that have clarification,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Right? You saw that, Nancy? You noticed
Yes,
that?
I
Good.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because when this was originally written down, people might not have known the names of those towns, right? They might not have known what that meant. And so the author who takes this oral tradition and puts it on paper, papyrus, doesn't put it on paper, but the person who writes this, right? The several people who write it. Remember, there's many authors of Genesis, and then there's these redactors. But the person who writes this is clarifying it to more modern readers, not modern in our context, but modern in the biblical sense, right? They're still ancient to us. But people who would have come along long after this oral tradition has been written would not have maybe known what those names of those cities meant, right? And so they give them the ancient name, but then they also give them the modern context
Right.
that name. So we know that this is an ancient piece of writing. And the really only thing that it really has in common in anything that we've read recently is the fact that it talks about Lot. So
Mhm.
it probably came out of this tradition of Lot stories. We probably think that at that time, right, there's a lot of traditions in these different regions of Canaan, the promised land of Israel, depending on when these were went through their final redaction. There are scholars, and I think this is probably true, and we'll see a little bit of evidence in this tonight. There are scholars who say that a lot of this was redacted during the Davidic kingdom, way
Oh,
long after Abram, right? Abram is about two, 2084 BC, around that time. The Davidic kingdom, 9th century BC, a long time after that. So, but there's a lot of evidence of that also in these texts. And we will see a little bit of that tonight in tonight's text. But we know that this is a really old piece of writing, probably came from the Lot tradition. Um, and it's put here, right? It's put here for a couple of reasons. Why does the redactor do this, right? Well, it reinforces again the difference between Lot's choice of good land, right? That we talked about last week, Wolf. You don't know this, but we talked about last week how Lot chooses by his eyes. When Abram gives him the choice of land, they need to separate. And Abram says, you know, what piece of land do you do? This is a magnanimous gesture on Abram's part to give his younger nephew a choice of land, right? The patriarch would have had the choice of land. And Lot doesn't do the right thing. Lot chooses by his eyes, right? Self-gratification, and he takes the best for himself. And Abram gets this very arid, dry land, but he's okay with it because Abram is siding with God, right? He's like, God will provide.
Mm.
And so he doesn't push back against it. Lot, on the other hand, takes what is like the second Garden of Eden, well watered and arid and just really good. But it's also in a land that's inhabited by people who are known to not be on the side of God, right? Evil people. Every time we see in the Old Testament an Eastern movement, it tells us that it's away from God.
Yeah.
And so Lot chooses this on his own, right? And this is to reinforce Lot's choice of land, that Lot sees by his eyes, he chooses to go against God, but Abram is going to stick with God. And Abram's going to, you know, understand that this land is a gift from God, and he's going to live with that, right? And so this piece of writing reinforces that. And it's also a test, right? This is also a test of is Abram really serious about being separated from Lot, right? Because he rescues Lot. And the choice is this, is Lot going to go back with him to Canaan, to the promised land, to God's land? He's going to stay on his own, right? Is Abram going to say, well, come back with me? So it is really ultimately a test of Abram also. We know what happens, right? Spoiler alert, we know what happens. But the fact that we never see a dialogue in this piece of writing between Abram and Lot kind of foreshadows the fact that this separation has been for good. Right? They never talk in this, despite the fact that Abram rescues him. There's never any conversation between the two. There's also only a few references to God in this. I don't know if you've noticed that also. Right? It is very much like, did you know that in the book of Esther, there is no mention of God?
Oh.
The only book in the Bible that never mentions God. Hey, Agnes. But
Hi,
here,
sorry.
you didn't have well, there she's gone again. She was here and now she's gone. Technology is a blessing when it works. But there's only a few references to God, right? We see one of those references. Do you guys remember?
Um,
Oh, in case you don't know, Wolf, and if you have a Bible with you, we're on Genesis 14. Well, first
Found
the
it.
first got it. So the first reference to God is like the blessing of Melchizedek. That's the first mention of God in this thing, right?
Oh,
And that
yeah.
comes along at the end, right? 17. And then Abram's acknowledgement of that, right? So that is the first time that we even see a mention of God in this. And the interesting thing about that is that, okay, how do I say this without jumping ahead? We would think that the climax of this story, right, is, well, what would you think the climax of this story is? Like, if you were reading the beginning of the story, what would you think the climax should be? Right, I'll give you a hint. It is not what the climax actually is.
I have no idea.
Anyone want to take a stab at it?
No.
So Abram, right? Abram wins this great battle over these kings, these powerful kings, right? And so we would think that Abram's the next move, right? The climax is going to be, well, like any king, he's going to be this sovereign, powerful king, right? He's going to claim his land. He's going to take tribute, right? He's going to take plunder. He's going to take spoils. He's going to do all those things that ancient kings do, right?
Yeah.
Does he?
No,
No.
No.
No, he doesn't, right? What does he
but he
do?
but he explains that because he gave an oath to God,
Yes,
correct?
Barbara. Yes. Yeah. So tell me, do you want to expand on that? You want to tell us?
Well, just that I think they would take nothing more than, I think he said, than anything they ate, their own people. Like he didn't want anything. He made this deal with God, and he was good with that.
Yeah. So this anticlimax, right, ends up being about who?
About God.
About God.
Yeah.
Yeah, about God, right? It's absolutely nothing to do with this man who's just defeated this really powerful army. But the climax of this story points to God, right? For somebody who's not
Yes.
mentioned
Yeah. Until
Mm.
then. Yeah.
until then, right? So that is a little bit about jumping ahead, right? And the fact that, remember, we're these 28 mentions of kings and showing the power of Abram, who's been able to defeat these really powerful kings. Why? Because he's got the ultimate powerful king on his side, right? Abram is
Okay.
able to conquer because he is God's faithful warrior. And this is really important. And Wolf, this is really important for you, for somebody who was in the military, right? Is that in this time, right? In the time of Abram, remember, there's lots and lots of gods that are being worshipped by all kinds of different cultures. And the sign of who was the most powerful god, right? Was the God who won in war. So if if your tribal god defeated another tribal god, then it meant that your tribal god was weak. And so the fact, right? So, right, we see this with Pharaoh, right? We talked a lot about the plagues being a polemic against the gods of Egypt. All these ways that Yahweh, the God of Israel, is able to defeat these other gods. So if you're defeated in war, it means that your God is weak. And so this is a building up of Yahweh. Because Yahweh is around, he's just a minor tribal god. We're going to talk a little bit about this tonight. When we talk about, let me just find the right wording for this. I want to find how the NIV translates this. I know how to translate it in Hebrew. I want to get the right way that the NIV. Okay, by the God of Most High, right? In Hebrew, Elyon is how it translates in Hebrew, but it translates in the NIV at least by the God Most High. This is going to be really important. And we will talk about this because the crux of this text that we really want to focus on is Melchizedek. So any questions? Do we have any questions? Let me just quickly look at my notes and make sure that I have not skipped over something that you need to know. Any questions so far about this military escapade?
I was surprised how many men Abram had that were born in his household. I mean, it's
Yeah.
318 trained men for a man
Yeah.
of peace.
Yeah. For say again, Barbara, did you say a man of peace?
318 trained men for a man of peace.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but we see that yes. So again, remember they're probably just servants. I don't know if he necessarily, I know it says trained, right? I don't know if he necessarily trained them for war, right? He was a man of peace. Which is kind of ironic in this. But yes, and I think that this is always a mistake that we make when we think about biblical characters, right? We have this impression in our head of what they were like, right? And we probably always think of Abram as just this ancient old man, right? In a robe and sandals with a long beard, something like God,
Yeah.
right? But and traveling around, right? We think of him as a nomad. We don't think of him as a wealthy as a wealthy, semi-nomadic man that has a very powerful household. And he comes out of Egypt very powerful and wealthy. And
How does
so,
that
yeah.
happen?
Well, remember, how does he get all this wealth? Do you guys remember from the chapter where he pawns Sarai off in Egypt?
Oh, yes.
Mm.
He
Yes.
demands all of that of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh
Yes.
makes him a very wealthy man.
Right.
And there are scholars also who say that his father Terah had some wealth, right? We don't think that they started as poor people. Right? There was probably a little wealth in that family to begin with. Sarai has a hand servant, right? When we get to the next chapter and we talk about Hagar, I mean, that doesn't come for, she was probably acquired when they were in Egypt. But he's a man of means, and probably his father also was.
Okay.
Questions, comments, anything else? Right. And this is really a change in character too, right? From the Abram we knew, right? We see Abram in this story in the beginning, when we talk about him and Sarai, abandoning everything and going to Egypt because there's this famine. And he's this coward, right? He's afraid that Pharaoh's going to kill him. So he tells his wife, pretend you're my sister, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
he's a coward. And he tells him, pretend you're my sister. And I mean, there's like a grain of salt of truth in that. We do learn later in Genesis that she is a half sister.
Yeah.
Right? We do learn that. And so there's a grain of truth. But not the way he passes her off as
I was
my
going to
sister.
say, yeah.
It's kind of misleading, right? And he's a coward. And he does this to save his skin. But now we have this Abram that's coming out like, he's not afraid. He goes into war. He does battle for his nephew who really screwed him over, right? We see a very different side of Abram. Remember the story of Abram? We see Abram moving a lot in this story from different locations. And why? Because there's also a metaphor to that. Yes, he's physically moving. And yes, people in the Old Testament move a whole lot. But there's also a metaphor to that. It means it's a representation of your spiritual journey, right? Abram is growing in his spirituality. He's physically moving, but he's also growing spiritually. That doesn't mean he's 100% perfect. Okay, I want everybody here who's moving on their spiritual journey, who's gotten there and is 100% perfect to raise their hands. It's a life journey, right? We go and then we go ahead 3 steps and we fall back 2.
I see him as more adaptable because it was very
In
hard
what way?
times.
In
Well,
what way? Yeah, tell us.
he's they're dealing with famine, they're dealing with warring groups.
Mm-hmm.
He's just trying to adapt to survive. And
He is.
I don't know if that's necessarily cowardice. I just think about how people try to survive during World War II. The Jews first had to try and be adaptive, and if you didn't adapt, you would get punished, or you had to flee. And if you were smart, you did flee. But even though you left Germany and thought, "Oh, I'm out of the problems," you still dealt with hardship and what's the word I'm looking for? Maltreatment,
Mm-hmm.
even in the safe
sure.
areas. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that is a wise observation, Wolf, right? So I understand you're saying he's very pragmatic.
Yeah, pragmatic. Thank you.
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
practical and he's pragmatic. Yeah. What say all of you to that, right? Because I'm going to ask a really challenging question then.
Uh-oh.
Here it comes.
Here it comes,
Well,
right?
he certainly had a lot of various adventures and always seemed to somehow come out on top because of his covenant with God.
Ooh, so there's something to be said, Linda, because his covenant with God. Yes. Yeah, he does, right? He goes through a lot of stuff that takes very practical reasoning, right? It takes
Yes,
somebody
yeah.
to be pragmatic to survive. It takes
Yes.
us a lot. We have to be pragmatic too to survive, right?
Yeah. We
But
do.
let's also go back to what Linda just said, right? There are times when he succeeds, and there's times when he falls flat on his face and fails. And what
Right.
is the common denominator there? Do you remember why he fails? Do you remember the times that he fails and the times he succeeds?
Hmm.
You said it, Linda.
Well, he had the covenant with God, so I assume
Yeah.
God protected him,
Mm.
but I don't know why he let him fail sometimes.
No,
When
I
did he
don't think God
fail?
let him fail. No.
What do you think, Nancy? Did God
No,
let
he
him fail?
doesn't he doesn't let us fail. He watches us fail. He watches us stray.
Yeah, he watches us, right?
I mean, God does not make anybody do anything. He leads people.
Yeah. And so I'm going to say this to Wolf and Linda's comments, and I want you to tell me how you feel, right? We as humans want to retain control. Is that a
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like to, right? And there are times when we especially want to retain control. In those times when we want control, where do we stand with God and
We're
God's
away.
promise? Mhm,
Right. We have left
mhm,
our covenant with him, whether or not it's a
mhm.
obvious covenant.
So, what does that, how do I say this? Where does that put our
I,
trust in God, right? Go ahead, Barbara. Are you going to say something?
I was going to say, I don't think it's that we lose faith, but we lose
Mhm,
trust. We just kind of think, okay,
mhm,
we'll take it over. And then
mhm.
all of a sudden we say, okay, now it's all screwed up. We'll give it back to you. It's really trust, not faith.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes, and that's exactly it, right? Because remember the biblical definition of faith is believing in things that we can't see, but we still believe they're true. That's a really bad paraphrase of what Pauline theology would tell us. But
Hmm.
believing in things that don't seem possible, right? That
Yeah.
is a difference. And there's a difference. I mean, they go hand in hand, but there is a difference between that and trust. In the case of Abram, right, God has given him lots of promises that seem really hard to have faith and trust in both, right? He's probably about 75 when God says, I'm going to make you a great nation. He's been married to this barren woman, probably since they were teenagers, tweens, and she hasn't been able to produce an heir. And so 70 years later, well, 60 years later, when God enters the picture and tells him this, that's pretty hard to believe, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Sure.
And so when these challenges come up, he tends to fall back on his own resources rather than trusting God,
Hmm. Yeah.
as do we,
Yeah.
as do we. And listen, rightfully so. Life isn't easy. These challenges that Wolf talks about in our life, right? It it makes it really easy for us to want to be very practical. And sometimes our being pragmatic doesn't always fall in line with God's will. Would you agree or disagree? And you don't have to take me as the authority here.
Yes,
um,
I agree.
I agreed.
Yeah,
yeah, I agree.
yeah. We all
I
say
also
that
think we,
reluctantly. Yeah, it's a reluctant thing to say. We don't even want to say it. We don't even want to say it, right? Because we think, A, it's going to shed bad light on us because, oh my God, I'm not being faithful. Oh my God, I believe in God. I'm not trusting God. But the fact is, it's really hard. Faith is not easy. C.S. Lewis has this wonderful quote, and I'm going to butcher this too. Like, if being a Christian was easy, Like everybody would do it.
Right.
Mm.
It's not easy. It's not easy to trust in God's promises when they look so far out of reach, when they look so impractical. And let me tell you, God's promises can look really impractical. I don't have to tell you that. You know that.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
And remember, like we said last week, is that, the author of Genesis never gives us a judgment call. They put it out there, and then we decide. It's not easy. And sometimes our faith means doing the things that don't seem practical. How does that sit, Wolf? Because I think you gave voice to what we all feel.
I guess you go through this phase, you don't know what's right or wrong too. You're just trying to do the best you can in the moment.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And sometimes when we're trying to do the best we can in that moment, our first resource isn't always God. Would everybody agree, or would you want to push back on me with that?
Yeah,
I think my big, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to add to that. They call it the
Mhm.
lizard brain.
Okay.
It's not your higher function, it's your
Mhm.
lower function, your instinct.
Mhm.
I think that's what he's fighting with.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely fighting with human instinct. And rightfully so. And rightfully so. Barbara?
I was just gonna say, I mean, only for me, it's mostly patience. I don't have patience. I want things done like right away.
Yeah. And Abrams certainly does too, right?
Yes.
And in what ways, Barbara, do you see Abram also being a very impatient
Well, I
way?
mean, he does say, I don't have an heir. You
Hmm?
promised me an heir, and I don't
Hmm.
have one. And like, okay, we're getting a little long in the tooth here. How's that? When's that going to happen? So,
Right. And speaking to being pragmatic, if you have read ahead, what does he do when he can't get that heir? Well, he does two things, and one thing we've already read about. Who did he think his heir was going to be?
oh, he does say,
His
he
wife's.
did say,
Lot, right? That's his
Yeah.
first
Oh.
instinct. Lot,
Oh.
right?
Oh. Oh.
Remember when God says, cut your ties completely to your family. And who does Abram take with him?
Lot.
Lot. And the blessing doesn't come, does it? Because he has not cut that umbilical cord with Lot. And why does he take Lot with him? Because God's promise seems too good to be true.
okay, let me ask you, then who is Eliezer of Damascus? Because that's who he says,
Eleazar, yeah. So
yeah,
Eleazar is one of his servants.
okay.
And in Abram's time, right, in that time period, it would have been a custom of wealthy people like Abram to, if they didn't have an heir, right, meaning a male heir, because remember, inheritance rights were not given to women. Property and inheritance rights were not, even if you were the only girl like I am, my father could not have willed me this house. If my mom had, she couldn't have willed my mom or me this house. There would have to been a male, right? And so if you did not have a male heir, which was a huge disgrace in Abram's time to the woman, especially, right? Really didn't reflect on the man. But you were allowed by custom to adopt a male servant. And a lot of wealthy husbands and wives of that time did that, right? Because it would be somebody to take care of them in their old age, right? And so, which would have been the boys, right? The son's job, especially the elder son. So you would adopt your servant. It was totally legal. and that person would have taken care of you in your old age, and they would have served as who you would pass your property on to.
Mm.
Your estate would have remained intact. So yes, that's correct, Barbara. Abram's first thought, second thought is Eliezer is going to be my heir, because I can't produce an heir. If it's not going to be Lot, who's going to be my plan B? Then plan C is going to be Eliezer.
But then Sarah had him sleep with the servant, right?
Hagar, yeah. Which
Hagar.
again,
Right. To
Mhm.
produce an heir.
yeah. So before you go like, ooh, right? And we will talk about this in the next week or so, right? Before you say, ooh, that's really creepy, that was also tradition.
Mm.
And what would happen, and I don't want to go too far into that story. That was a tradition, and we will talk about what happened with that tradition when we get there. I don't want to jump ahead, but what I am going to say to that, Linda, is that, again, being very pragmatic, because it goes back to patience, right? It's now been, we see when we read this text, we see it as like, oh, yeah, well, this was this week and then that was next week. It's not. Actually,
Mhm.
12 years go by
Mhm.
between the time that this happens and Sarah and Sarai gives Hagar to Abram. Like 12
Mhm.
years, and there's still no heir, and there's still no, and now there's a separation from Lot, like no going back. And God has said no to Eleazar, right? And I do want to say one more thing to that, Barbara, with Eleazar, right? Is that the tradition would also be, the law would also be, and by this I don't mean Jewish law, right? Because this Abram is not a Jew. He is the father of Judaism, but he's also the father of Islam. He's also the father of Christianity, one of the patriarchs of three faiths, right? He's the patriarch of three faiths. But the ancient Near East tradition slash law would be that if you adopted one of your servants to serve as your heir, if by chance you ended up having a child by a wife, by a wife, right? Because there's polygamy, um, then that child, the biological child, would become the actual heir, right?
Mm.
It's not because I adopted this servant and now my biological child takes the back seat. It doesn't work that way. The firstborn son, biological, always has inheritance rights.
Mhm.
So to go back to your point, Linda, about yes, that Hagar is given to Abram for an heir, right? It goes back to Wolf's point about, being practical and pragmatic. And it goes back to Barbara's point about not being patient, right? This is what we see time and again with, Abram's going to help God out because he doesn't fully trust
They've
him.
been patient for 77 years or something.
He's been patient a long time,
Lost their patience.
right? He's losing
Right.
patience. Hey, we can't blame him. We're not here to pass judgment on him. We're here to learn from him. But that's true, right? As I always tell everybody, and listen, and it is hard for me to practice when I preach also. I I lose patience with God also, folks. I will admit this. So I'm not preaching from to below, right? I was 10
Yeah.
years in the process to become a priest when it should only take 5. I've been through
Yeah.
a lot of Abram moments. I have tried to take a lot of things into my own hands, right? And it doesn't work. And in hindsight, when I look back and think, why did that happen? Why was there this stall, right? And lots of human things that happen in that, right? A priest who had jealousy issues with me and sabotaged the process. Why did that happen? Why did the priest who was going to take me through the night before my discernment committee started, he decided to get a call in New York City? Hello. Why did any of this happen? And I tried many times to take it in my own hands. And I failed inevitably every time, right? Because when I look back at that process, it gave me 5 wonderful years at St. Mark's.
Mm.
And I would not be the priest I am today if I had not had those 5 years of turmoil and blessings at St. Mark's. These 5 years with these wonderful people who really formed me into, I mean, listen, I had my call when I was 16. Talk about patience. I was, how the heck old was I when I actually started the process? Oh, way old. Older,
Were you going to seminary when you were at St. Mark's or not?
Oh no, that was part of the
No.
process. Yeah, that was part of the process. So I had my calling when I was 16. Okay, when I was 16, how many years ago was that? When I started my discernment in 2008. I was 16 in 1979. Hello, folks. It was
Yeah.
a long time between, and in the process, I had gotten plagiarized, became a New York Times bestseller. I had to abandon my career because it was a prominent historian who plagiarized me. Why the heck did all that happen? Sure, because why? I didn't listen to God. I didn't trust God like Abram.
Hmm.
Right? Women were only being ordained for a few years when I got my call. It was such a powerful call. What the heck was wrong with her? She didn't follow it. I didn't. I chose a secular path because I didn't trust God. And what happened? Yeah, I got plagiarized by one of the best in the field. Yeah, my book became a New York Times bestseller. Verbatim. Yeah, the guy got away with it. Yeah, we couldn't prove any of it. Why? Because I didn't trust God.
Oh, goodness.
So it didn't have your name as the author, it had the other person.
Heavens no, it had this famous historian's name on it.
Mhm.
With an explanation that said in 4 years you'll get the rest of the book. Why? Because I was going on to graduate school to become a PhD.
Did you finish it for him? No, I'm kidding.
I could, my career was
Yeah,
destroyed, right?
unbelievable.
And then when he
Unbelievable.
finally put this monstrosity out, it got awful reviews. That wasn't like the first one. Well, heck yeah, because it was written by 2 of us.
Mhm.
So why
Of
didn't I go
course.
on to be a great historian? Because I didn't trust God.
Hmm.
That's
Well,
a modern. That's a modern. What's that?
I can understand why you would have been untrustworthy at that point.
Yeah, because oh, hello Noah. Oh, it's so cute.
Oh,
Oh, hi.
Oh, he's so cute. Look at him. He's like, I'm on camera. Um, but yeah, but
Wants
that's
to say
a
hi.
modern. Oh, are you going to
Say
bed,
hi.
Noah?
good night.
Good night,
Everyone's
Noah.
saying good night.
Oh, sleep tight. Sweet dreams.
Bye bye.
Oh,
Aw.
so cute. But and I think that if you think on this throughout the week, you'll think of many times that you didn't trust God and you ended up on the wrong side, right? And it doesn't mean anything against who we are or who our faith, right? We all have Abram moments in our lives.
Mm. Yeah, but come on, 70 some years. That's pushing
Well,
it. Yeah.
well, listen, okay, but remember, we don't know how those years looked.
Yeah.
We know that in some Hebrew writing, right, there's like this fraction, and I'm totally not a math person, but there's a fraction that could bring that down. So we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And remember in Hebrew that numbers are excuse
Yeah.
me, I never want to say
Significant.
numerology, but significance, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
He's old. He's old for his time, right? His time 40 is old for his time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it
Yeah, I don't
says
understand
that
how he
they both
survived.
lived to be well over 100. I'm sorry. Well,
300, 400, 900, right? Yeah, Wolf.
Yeah, I was chiming in with Linda. Sorry, I stepped on you.
Mhm.
But I was surprised too. 175.
Is young. Is young for Genesis. Read the beginning of Genesis, right? What do we see? We see like Methuselah, right? Is that I'm sorry, I'm a little bit slow now. I'm slowing down. But we see like Enoch or something, 900 years old, right? Noah's father, like 900 years old. Like, the numbers like, and there are historians who try to explain that. And there are people who are literalists, and I get it, right? You will learn, Wolf, with me. I think everybody knows here I'm not a literalist. I sometimes apologize for it, but I don't sometimes. But there are literalists who believe that and say, well, after the flood, time changed. God answered sin by reducing the years that people live. There's still extravagant numbers, right? But
Mhm.
there are scholars who will say, no, you know what? They counted numbers in a different way,
That's
and
what
that it's
different
like,
calendars.
yeah, or like they used the base number was different. So our 1 year might equal 7 in that base year. Um, Abram is not 10 years old, but in
That
some
makes
cases,
it make so much more sense.
yeah, yeah. You can
Yeah.
Google that. And I know last time we were together before we broke for the summer, I think I sent you guys like an article and said this is way too scholarly for all of us to understand. But like if you grasp the intent of it, you'll see there's a base number, right? That ancient Israel had a base number that we did not use. And he
Yeah.
breaks them down, right? So
You,
you don't
you know,
have to be
the
Go
funny
ahead,
thing
Barbara.
is, I don't think he was as concerned about his own age as he was more Sarah's. No, I mean, it was
Mm,
really, he's looking at her, thinking
yeah.
she's not going to have a baby. I mean,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
even
Yeah.
if there is a base number and the numbers are not as large, she apparently was past, um, being a mother, being having babies. So I guess that's why he became impatient after 77 years.
Yeah, and she's like 10 years younger, right? Which is still old, right? And
Yeah.
yes, because the shame is in that culture, the shame is on the woman, right?
Mm.
Men can have children into their whatevers, right? Al Pacino just had a kid, I think it's 125 or something. But you can have kids into your hundreds, right? But women, there's a biological clock,
Yeah.
and hers had expired. So yes, he was more worried about her than him. So the bad news is I'm not going to go into Melchizedek tonight. We are going to pick Melchizedek up next week. And for the reason, and here's the reason, and I know that we want to move ahead, but you will bless me for this because this chunk about Melchizedek is extremely important. And and it's okay to say yes or no. So I know we kind of threw this out last week. Has anybody here heard of Melchizedek?
Uh,
Don't
So
know his
this is
story.
what's that, Nancy?
I don't know his story.
You don't right. So this is his only story. These
Okay.
these what is it? It looks like 7 um verses. That's it. That is his story. But
That's
it's
it. Okay.
enormous. And it is
Oh,
so enormous that it will be used in the New Testament. We find references to Melchizedek in the New Testament, right?
When does
Because
that start?
he's in, let me see, he's used in Galatians, I believe. Wolf, Paul refers to Melchizedek, and I will get you those exact um passages, but it
okay.
is in Pauline theology, and I'll send that to you tomorrow, I promise. Um, but he isn't so important. He isn't used in the New Testament. Why? Does anybody know why? Have a guess? He is considered a foreshadow, a forerunner of Christ.
Well,
Does that
Oh,
have to do
okay.
with
So
him bringing out bread and wine?
Part of it,
and
right? Because what does that say, Barbara?
Well, I mean,
how
I
about it? Yeah.
kind of thought it had a reference to, in other words, I'm trying to think of the right words, like it was symbolic of what of Christ coming in for the
Yeah,
New Testament.
It's symbolic of the Eucharist,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Right. I
Yeah.
mean, in the story, in his story, it will also represent how do I say this? Is that it's not a staple, right? If he was gonna give somebody staple, he would give him bread and water. Like wine is meant for royalty. But yes, it is foreshadow of the Eucharist. The New
Well,
Testament. Mhm.
what I read
Mhm.
was that he was considered the priest of the God Most High. So
Yes, so he is. So yes, he is, right? He is. And in this, I'm just going to say this before we close for the night. So yes, he is the same as Abram. And we will go into this a bit more next week. So it's very common for people in Abram's day, right, to take attributes of their gods and attribute them to other gods to make those gods superior, right? And so the God Most High, right? That's what they translate it in the NIV. God Most High, right?
Mhm.
Is not specific to Yahweh at the time that it was said, right? It was specific to the god El, who is the of the pantheon of gods in the ancient Near East, who is the head god, right? This is the big one. El is the big one, right? Means God. That's what it means in Hebrew. El means God, lowercase. And so when Melchizedek and Abram both refer to Yahweh as God Most High, this is a very theological statement, right? It is calling Yahweh the supreme being, which would make Melchizedek the first high priest,
Hmm.
which Jesus will become the ultimate high priest. And if you've noticed, when you reread the story of Melchizedek next week, we will talk about that, and then we'll talk a little bit about Eliezer of Damascus. There you go, Barbara, in 15. We'll combine a little bit of the end of 14 with 15 because we probably will not take this whole class to talk about Melchizedek next week. But then again, we might. We don't know where God is moving us, but notice they both say this, right? Is a very theological statement. And I just totally lost my train of thought where I was going with that, which is a very human thing. But they are attributing this to Yahweh, right? Oh, that's what I wanted to say. When you reread this story this week, I want you to notice, right? There is no mention of Melchizedek's genealogy. He has no parents. When you read the story, you'll notice there's no, right? They tell us that he's the priest and a king, but there's no mention of who priested him. There's no mention of who kinged him, right? What made him? He's got no royal family. He's kind of just put on here he is. But he is the king of something. Did you notice what he's the king of?
I think it's
King of
Salem,
Salem.
isn't it?
Of
Salem.
Salem. What do you think that is?
I knew it was in Massachusetts.
No, it's not Salem, Massachusetts. No, it is not. Which I'm gonna now have in my head tonight that wonderful song by the Bee Gees, Massachusetts. It's one of my favorite songs. No, his is not Salem, Massachusetts. Guesses. Guesses? You know this.
I have to go back and look.
Do you want me to tell you, or do you want to research this, folks?
King of Salem.
The definition that I'm looking at says
Mhm.
King of Salem, Jerusalem.
Yes, it's a reference to Jerusalem.
Okay.
No, mine
Where'd you
doesn't
find
say
that?
Jerusalem.
What's that, Wolf?
Where did you find the Jerusalem comment?
Do you have an
Well, I'm using
annotated?
the study Bible that
Mm.
I use for my
Mhm.
kids.
Yeah.
Okay, and I obviously have others, but I like this one because it really breaks it down because it is a kid's
Mm-hmm.
an older kid's Bible type. Yeah, but the
And
definition says a king of Salem, Jerusalem, and priest of the Most High
mhm.
appears and disappears
Mm,
somewhat mysteriously in the book of Genesis.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that ties right back into what you just said about we don't know anything about him.
We don't know anything about him, right?
Yeah, and my version doesn't even say anything about Jerusalem.
Mhm. So Salem, so whenever you see Salem in the Hebrew Bible, it is a reference to Jerusalem.
Oh,
And so this is this high priest king of Jerusalem, right? It's starting to sound kind of Christ-like, right? Who,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
appears from the Most High, right?
right.
Um,
Precisely.
it's very Christ-like, right? And
Yes.
believed to be Christ, right? There's scholars who believe this is Christ. And I want to say this before we end, before we get too involved, but there are scholars also, and we'll also see this as we move ahead, right? We've talked about the angel of the Lord, right? And there are many times when, and we'll talk about this as we get further on, as these angels of the Lord start to appear, right? But there are times that the angel of the Lord is more Christ-like than an angel-like, than angelic, right? And we'll point them
Oh,
out when we get to them. And so there are scholars today who say these are so right, we call an appearance by God a theophany, right? Theo meaning God, uh, Ophany, right, meaning appearance. So there are many scholars who say these are Christophanies, an appearance of Christ
oh,
before the incarnation, right? This proof that goes back that Christ was in the beginning, just like John tells us, the Gospel of John, right? What is the evidence for the Gospel of John, right? Predating Christ to creation, being the word of creation. Well, here's the evidence. This is the evidence they'll use. Now, as a student of the Hebrew Bible, ugh, I feel awful saying that because I always want you to look at the Hebrew Bible in its own right, right? Because when this was written, it wasn't intended to mean that. These people who put Genesis down, these various authors and redactors, they weren't thinking about a Messiah. So that's my first thing. There are plenty of scholars who will read the Hebrew Bible and find all of these prophecies of Christ, and that is true with the prophets, right? But these early writings of the Hebrew Bible, I don't know. But what it does say to us as Christians is that the Holy Spirit was moving when these texts were written, right? The authors never intended it that way, but God had other intentions. And Melchizedek is one of those times when it really looks like an appearance by Christ.
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah, and we will talk about that next week. And we'll talk about what all this means because this chapter is chocked full of good stuff. You want to know. So reread that. And be prepared. We're gonna move on to 15 once we talk about that. Probably take us like a half hour to get through Melchizedek, and then we'll go on to 15. Will throw us a little off, but it's well worth it. Questions, comments for tonight? Wolf, did you
Always
enjoy your
interesting.
time with us?
Yeah, I enjoyed. I learned some things, and I inherited my father-in-law's Bible, so I'm learning how to use it. So
Which
this
one do you
was
have?
helpful. Holy Bible, New Living Translation.
Oh, okay, that's different than most of us. I don't think any of us. Yeah, okay, that's a different version than most of us have, the NLV. Yeah. So what do we all use? So I'm using an RS and I'm using an NRSV because that was like the only gospel in general. What's everybody
I-
else using?
I
have
use the
King James.
NIV.
Yep, it's really, we're very closely related, Barbara. We are stemming from the same branch. Nancy, we know you're using the study
New
Bible.
King
Lynn-
James, right.
Oh,
It's
you're
New
using
King
a New
James.
King James. Okay.
I have
I'm
King James.
using the King James.
Oh.
Also
Oh.
now, even though I bought that NIV version,
Mm.
but the font on that is so tiny,
Too
it's so
small?
hard to read. And I just find this one, this is the one that was given to my mother.
Okay.
No, actually, this is the one that my parents gave us one year for our anniversary. And
Okay.
it's just, I just like the language and the way it's written. It
See.
makes it easy.
Yeah, there's some people who love the KJV. So yeah. I thought you were using the Good News.
I was for a while, but
But you switched over.
then I tried all different ones and I ended up using this one.
Yeah, I mean, remember, your understanding is always as good as your translations. There's a lot out there. I personally hate the message, and I will probably quote the message this week in my sermon. Ugh. But but I mean, sometimes it's valuable. I think this week it might be valuable. But here's just one more thing I want to say before we go. If you want a host of translations, and I probably say this a million times, Bible Gateway, Google Bible Gateway on Google. That's where you Google things, right? It's on Google. So Google Bible Gateway, and you can find every translation under the sun, a million that didn't even think existed. And if you run across something hard, it's always good to get a few translations.
I have a
Well,
quick
maybe
question.
I'll get that new one out that I ordered and try it for this week.
Try different translations. You get a
Mhm,
different
yeah.
perspective. Who said
I
they
have
had
a
a
quick
question?
question for you.
Yeah, Linda.
Was Melchizedek one of the three present with Abram and Sarah when she became pregnant?
Interesting. So one of the three angels.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
no.
that wasn't.
So it doesn't say Melchizedek, right? But remember, that's a foreshadow of something else.
Yes.
remember?
Well, yes, her pregnancy, but
Well, yes, but those three angels foreshadow something else.
The three kings.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Yeah, the Trinity.
Yeah.
But Barbara, you are still on the right track, because there are some people who will say, and we'll talk about this next week, that Melchizedek kind of is a gateway also for the Magi.
Mhm.
Oh.
And we'll talk about that next week. So you're on track. But yeah, so evidence, right? Evidence of the Trinity in those three angels.
Mhm.
Because we definitely know the author isn't specific, but definitely leads us very strongly to think that, to know at the end, that one is definitely God. But who are these other two angels with him, right? The Holy Spirit and the Son. If you Google that in artwork, I mean, there's amazing artwork for that passage. That's just incredibly beautiful.
That's our first window in church. The first stained glass window.
Is it?
Well,
So
of Abram and Sarah and the three spirits, or the three angels.
So there's some more beautiful artwork. Yeah, you can Google that. I mean, one day I'd love to do a class on art and what we learn from art. I mean, there's some beautiful, beautiful things that we don't know because we don't study about icons, right? There is a language to icons, and that isn't my field of expertise. But we did touch a little bit about base when we had that last class, and we talked about the apostles, and we ended with Mary Magdalene, right? And how art has depicted her compared to the mother, right? There's much to be said in art. So if you get a chance, Google that passage in art. And do images. It's beautiful. There's some beautiful imagery on that passage. Questions, comments before we go?
I'm sure if you called Mother Val, she'd be happy to come and do a talk about icons.
She did icons. That's a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She does them every year.
Interesting.
Yes, She did.
Wow.
A lot.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I mean, that is really, that is a truly, because there's amazing theology in that. Even in artwork, I mean, depending on what century you're looking at this biblical artwork, right? There is a theology behind that also. But if you want to know, right? Again, look at those pictures, right? We talked about Judas, how Judas is portrayed, right? When we did the apostles, how Judas is portrayed down the centuries in art. Judas Iscariot.
Mhm.
So, questions, comments before we go for the night? Helpful to us tonight?
Yes.
Always.
Yeah.
Very.
Always.
Good.
Very good.
And it's wonderful as always to have all of you. And welcome, Wolf. It's great to have a new voice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We hope we see everybody
Thank you,
next
ladies.
Monday. We'll have a man
Sounds
back when
good.
John gets back, Wolf.
Yeah.
Everyone,
All
good
right, that
night.
sounds
Good night,
good.
everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a good
No,
night.
yes.
Enjoy the week.
Good night, Jenna.
Good night, Nan. Love you.
Love
Good
you.
night. Good night,
night.
everybody.